4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm a body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit.
On New Year's Day 2023, a woman named Anna Walshe vanished from her home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, and nobody reported her missing for 3 days. Not even her husband. When investigators finally started pulling the threads, what they found wasn't just a murder. It was the end of a long, carefully constructed con. Her husband, Brian Walshe, had spent years lying to everyone around him, his friends, his business partners, the courts, and most devastatingly, the woman who loved him.
Inside of bag one was a pair of green boots, a black jacket with red-brown stains, and a bracelet.
And then he did something so heinous and depraved that it would shock everyone. This is the full story of how a Serbian immigrant who built her American dream from the ground up was killed by the one person she trusted most, and how a trail of Google searches, trash bags, and DNA evidence brought him to justice. It is a story of abuse, financial scandal, and deceit. This is the story of one of America's worst wife murderers. Ana Ljubicic came to America with almost nothing. She'd arrived from Belgrade, Serbia in 2005, speaking multiple languages, holding a degree in French language and literature from the University of Belgrade, and carrying not much but a strong work ethic that most people only talk about. Her first job in the United States was as a housekeeping attendant at the Inn at Little Washington, a famous luxury restaurant and inn in rural Virginia. She made beds, cleaned toilets, polished glasses, and set tables for up to 16 hours a day. She later wrote about that period of her life on Instagram, saying that none of it was glamorous, but that she was grateful for every single minute of it. By 2008, Anna had made her way to Massachusetts, where the market was better, and she landed a full-time role as reservations manager at the Wheatley Hotel, a 5-star estate in Lenox in the Berkshires. She was 25 years old, living alone in a foreign country, building a life from the ground up. It was there at the Wheatley that she met a man named Brian Walshe. To Anna, he seemed charming, wealthy, and deeply connected to Boston's upper-crust high society. He was the son of a prominent Boston neurosurgeon. He hosted lavish dinner parties that reportedly cost $20,000 or more. He talked about art, money, and business opportunities. For Anna, who had worked so hard to get to where she was, Brian Walshe looked like someone who had already arrived. Her friends say it was love at first sight on her side. She described him as her best friend. What Anna didn't know, and what would take years to fully come to light, was that almost everything about Brian Walshe was a lie. Brian Walshe grew up wealthy in the Boston area. His father, Thomas Walshe, was a respected neurosurgeon, and Brian had every advantage a person could ask for. He briefly attended Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, but dropped out in his sophomore year and checked himself into the Austin Riggs Center, a psychiatric facility in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, where he was diagnosed as a sociopath. His own father later told a family friend he didn't want Brian back in his life. Quote, "If I did, I know that I would be letting mayhem back into my life," Thomas reportedly said. The two were estranged for roughly 12 years. Brian's online profiles listed him as CFO of shell companies with no real presence, and he told people he had made his money from a software program in college. None of it was true. The real money came from fraud. Starting in 2011, Brian ran a years-long art scam that began with a trip to South Korea to visit a college friend whose family owned a legitimate collection of major 20th century artwork. Brian told his friend he could sell some of the pieces at a great price on his behalf. The friend trusted him, and Brian left South Korea with 2 Andy Warhol paintings from Warhol's famous Shadows series, a Warhol $ silkscreen, and 2 prints by the pop artist Keith Haring. His own diary, later quoted in court documents, showed exactly what he was thinking. He wrote, referring to his friend's family, "They have stuff that is good," and later after the friend tried to get the artwork back, the owner wanted his art back. Tough day. He also wrote, describing his victims, that they can eat it. Once back in the United States, Brian sold the original authentic Warhols to a gallery in 2011 without ever telling his friend or giving him a cent. He then hired an artist to forge replicas of the same paintings. In 2015, he sold the first set of fakes to a French art consultant for $145,000, a buyer who had purchased them with his father's retirement savings. Brian flew to France for the transaction and had the paintings framed in a way that deliberately concealed the backs of the canvases, where the Andy Warhol Foundation authentication stamps would have been. The buyer didn't discover the fraud until 2020, when law enforcement approached him during a trip to Los Angeles. Brian then had a second set of fakes made. In November 2016, he listed them on eBay for $100,000, using photographs of the original stolen paintings to make the listing look legitimate. The ad caught the eye of Ron Rivlin, the owner of Revolver Gallery in Los Angeles, the world's largest Andy Warhol dealership. Rivlin later said he had bought over 1,000 Warhols in his career, and this was the only time he had ever been fooled. He called Brian's approach a clever playbook and Oscar-worthy performance. Rivlin sent an assistant to Boston, where Brian met her at the Four Seasons Hotel near Back Bay, handing over the fakes in frames that again covered the backs of the canvases. Rivlin's assistant handed over a cashier's check for $80,000, which Brian deposited that same day and immediately began withdrawing. When Rivlin compared the paintings to the eBay photos, he knew instantly they were forgeries. He tried calling Brian 16 times. Brian ignored every call. When Rivlin eventually got through to Anna, Brian finally responded by email, playing dumb and stringing Rivlin along. He eventually returned $30,000 and went silent. Rivlin later told reporters he's a calculated guy. He would only cooperate when he was forced to. After his father died in 2018, Brian was also accused of destroying his father's will, which had disinherited him entirely, and draining tens of thousands of dollars from the estate. In 2021, Brian pleaded guilty in federal court to wire fraud and related charges. He was placed on home confinement in Cohasset, Massachusetts, awaiting sentencing, and was prohibited from visiting certain stores without prior approval, including home improvement stores. That detail will become important later. Anna and Brian had gotten together around 2008 at the Wheatley. She divorced her first husband in 2014, and in December 2015, she and Brian married at Emmanuel Episcopal Church on Newbury Street in Boston. Not a single member of the groom's family attended the wedding. They settled in Cohasset and had 3 sons, who by early 2023 were 2, 4, and 6 years old. In 2014, while they were still dating, Anna had filed a police report claiming Brian threatened to kill her and a friend over the phone, but she refused to cooperate with investigators and the case went nowhere. Later, she wrote a glowing letter to the federal judge handling Brian's fraud case, asking for leniency and describing him as a loving father and husband. However, her tone changed with time. By 2022, the marriage was under serious strain. Anna had landed a dream job as a regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, one of the world's most prestigious real estate firms, and was splitting her time between Cohasset and Washington, D.C., where she had her own townhouse. Brian was stuck at home under house arrest watching their kids while Anna built a life in a different city. Her friends described constant arguments about when the family was finally going to move to D.C. together, and Anna's growing desperation to be near her children full-time. By late 2022, Anna had started an affair with a Washington real estate broker named William Fastow, the man who had sold her the D.C. townhouse. Court records also indicate she had begun quietly making plans to leave Brian and move permanently to Washington with the children, partly because she feared his fraud sentencing would land him in prison and leave her raising 3 boys alone regardless. Brian, meanwhile, was the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy, worth between $1 and $2.7 million, and was facing prison and a restitution bill he had no way to pay. By December 2022, prosecutors said he had begun obsessively checking the Instagram of Anna's contacts in Washington. On Christmas Day 2022, his phone was found to have searched Fasto's name. And on December 26th, just 5 days before the murder, Brian's own mother hired a private investigator to surveil Anna while she was in D.C. On the evening of December 31st, 2022, Anna and Brian hosted a quiet New Year's Eve dinner at their Cohasset home with a family friend named Jem Mutlu. As the new year ticked over, Jem left. Anna tried calling her mother in Serbia, her maid of honor, and her older sister in the early hours of January 1st. None of them picked up. She was last seen inside the house at around 4 a.m. After that, she suddenly went missing. At 4:55 in the morning on January 1st, Brian began making a series of searches on a laptop synced to his son's iPad. He searched, "How long before a body starts to smell? 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. How to clean blood from wooden floor. How to stop a body from decomposing. What happens when you put body parts in ammonia. And how to dispose of a 115-pound woman's body." Anna weighed approximately 115 pounds. He also searched, "Can you be charged with murder without a body, and how long for someone to be missing to inherit?"
11:56 on the 1st, luminol to detect blood. At 1:08, what happens when you put body parts in ammonia? At 1:21 p.m., is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? Those were on the January 1st.
Later that day, violating his home confinement conditions, he went to a Lowe's in Danvers, Massachusetts, and paid $462 in cash for a hacksaw, utility knife, hammer, Tyvek suit, rags, and cleaning supplies. Surveillance footage in the following days showed a man believed to be Brian making multiple trips to area dumpsters with heavy trash bags. On January 4th, 2023, it was Anna's employer, not her husband, who called the Cohasset Police Department to report her missing. Brian told investigators Anna had left for a work emergency in Washington on New Year's morning, kissing him goodbye and telling him to go back to sleep. But there was no rideshare booking, no flight record, no card activity, and her phone had never left Cohasset. On January 5th, police searched the woods around the family's home on Chief Justice Cushing Highway. On January 6th, a Massachusetts State Police Special Emergency Response Team joined the search. On January 7th, that ground search was suspended when no new evidence surfaced. 3 days of searching and nothing. On January 8th, investigators searched the Walshe home and found blood and a damaged knife in the basement, along with a Lowe's receipt dated January 1st. Brian was arrested that day for misleading a police investigation. Investigators then searched dumpsters near Brian's mother's apartment complex in Swampscott and a trash transfer station in Peabody, about 5 miles away. Inside 10 trash bags, they found towels, a Tyvek suit, a hatchet, a hacksaw, cutting shears, cleaning agents, a Prada purse, hunter boots, a vaccination card in Anna's name, and other personal items. DNA testing linked the hacksaw, hatchet, and other items directly to Anna. Both Anna's and Brian's DNA were found on the Tyvek suit and slippers. Blood was also found in Brian's car. However, one crucial piece remains missing. Anna Walshe's body has never been found. On January 18, 2023, Brian was charged with first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty and was held without bail. The case ground through the courts for nearly 2 years. In February 2024, Brian was separately sentenced in the art fraud case to 37 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $475,000 in restitution. Then, on November 18, 2025, just as jury selection was beginning, Brian changed his plea on 2 of the 3 murder charges, admitting he had disposed of Anna's body and lied to police while still denying he killed her. His defense attorney, Larry Tipton, told jurors Brian had found Anna dead in their bed after the party and panicked. The prosecution, led by Gregory Connor, laid out the Google searches, the Lowe's surveillance footage, the DNA evidence, and Brian's trail of lies, arguing he had killed Anna because he was about to lose her, lose his kids, and go to prison, and she was worth more to him dead than alive. Worth about $2.7 million, actually. Brian did not testify. The defense called no witnesses.
Prosecutors say he murdered her on New Year's and dismembered her body. He had pleaded guilty to lying to police and improperly disposing of her body, which still hasn't been found. In Norfolk Superior Court Thursday, the prosecution showed this surveillance footage from the Claremont Apartments in Abington, Massachusetts. The video near the dumpsters shows a Volvo pull up to the parking lot.
And how many of your residents had Volvos XC90s at the time?
None to my knowledge.
A Volvo has been one of the focal points of the investigation. On Wednesday, a forensic scientist for Mass State Police says he tested one on the Walshes' property.
There were 5 that tested positive for blood screening. One was the front driver's side.
In surveillance video, a person is seen walking over to the dumpster area and then walking away. Then coming back with a trash bag in hand. The person in the hoodie then walks away empty-handed. In court, we also heard from a digital forensics investigator for Mass State Police who tracked Brian Walshe's cell phone in the first few days of 2023.
On December 15, 2025, the jury found Brian Walshe guilty of first-degree murder after roughly 6 hours of deliberation. He showed little reaction as the verdict was read. 3 days later, on December 18th, Judge Diane Frenier sentenced him at Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham. Before the sentence was handed down, Anna's sister, Alexandra Dmitrievich, addressed the court. Losing my sister in January 2023 has forever changed our lives and left us with an unbearable emptiness, she said. I struggle with a grief that comes without warning, hoping every morning that this is all just a terrible dream. The most painful part of this loss is knowing her children must now grow up without their mother's hand to hold. Anna's mother, still in Serbia, had reportedly fallen into severe depression and chronic exhaustion since her daughter's murder. Judge Frenier sentenced Brian to life in prison without the possibility of parole and ordered consecutive sentences of up to 20 years for misleading police and up to 3 years for the improper disposal of Anna's body on top of that.
Take a look. This is video from the Lowe's store in Danvers on New Year's Day 2023. He's seen picking up several items that prosecutors allege he used to dismember his wife, Anna. At the self-checkout, the video shows items including a hacksaw as well as a hammer. Walshe is also buying several blue buckets, a mop, rags, and cleaning fluids, paying in cash. Prosecutors also showed video from that same day of a man, allegedly Walshe, at a Swampscott liquor store that he had frequented. He is seen taking a trash bag from his SUV and dropping it in a dumpster at the store, which was closed for the holiday.
Addressing Brian directly, she said, "The seriousness of your acts cannot be overstated. Your acts in dismembering your wife's body and disposing of her remains in multiple area dumpsters can only be described as barbaric and incomprehensible. You had no regard for the lifelong mental harm that your criminal acts inflicted on your then 2, 4, and 6-year-old sons." She said she simply cannot reconcile the man Brian's mother described in a letter with the man standing before her and noted his history of deceitful and manipulative behavior. Thousands of hours of investigative resources had been wasted, she said, because of his lies. Under Massachusetts law, the conviction is automatically reviewed by the state's Supreme Judicial Court. As of sentencing, prosecutors were still working with the medical examiner's office just to get a death certificate issued, because without a body, the church would not allow a funeral to proceed.
You will live with the guilt and burden of Anna Walshe's death for the rest of your life. As to count 1, the jury having convicted you of murder in the first degree, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As to indictment 2, lying to the police in connection with the investigation of a life felony, I sentence you to no less than 19 years, no more than 20 years, the statutory maximum, in prison to be served consecutive to the life sentence in 001.
And the final victim of the slaying was the couple's 3 sons, who are now in the foster care system.